How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, great dialogue. We're going to talk about 20 signs that says you are too close to an inmate. I am going to share this dialogue with Joe Pomponio. We're going to speed right through these signs. Hopefully this video could be used for training. I mean, that's the key. That's why we're doing it. It was suggested. So basically, these are 20 signs that I believe showcase that you are too familiar with an inmate. Some of these signs are kind of on you to realize. They're internal, but some of these signs could create some unique behaviors that if I'm working next to you, I should be able to notice. Now, before I bring on Joe, let me go ahead and introduce our sponsors. First sponsor, American Military University. If you guys are looking for a degree, look to seek higher education, please check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tear Talk. And again, guys, American Military University. Let's bring experience into the classroom. We also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. Guys, this book does very well, selling every day. So I want to thank you guys for the continued support on this book. I know this book is used in training. And if you guys haven't gotten the book yet, I have a link to that in the description. Please check it out. It's available on Amazon. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections. It's published by Blue 360 Media. This book is also doing very well. Thank you guys for continuing to support what I do. This book's got tons of passages, journals, shared information, not just myself, but other people in the profession. And it is published by Blue 360 Media. The link to that is in the description. If you get a chance, check out their website. They got a lot of books to offer. And good news, my rookie book, a little small book meant to complement the other books I have out there, is now in the hands of the publisher. We're going to be finalizing that and having that in the market. So again, this could be something that we can give off to our rookies in the academy. I think it's really good advice. It's not simple 101. So we'll balance what they're being taught in the classroom already and also balance the other books I have on the market. But it does have some really good advice for rookie staff. All right, let me bring on Joe.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Pomponio. I am a retired lieutenant with TDCJ of 30 years. I'm working as a investigator / jailer for our local sheriff's department and a panel member for Tear Talk.
Yes, we love having you, Joe. So, Joe, we're just going to rattle off these tips pretty quick, and then hopefully, if people want to utilize it for training, feel free to utilize it for training. That's what it's there for. But Absolutely. Again, the topic is 20 signs you're overly involved with the inmate. So I'll give out the sign. I'll speak first, and Joe will speak, and then we'll go to the next sign. Just kind of keep it moving. We'll keep these thoughts really quick. All right. So first one, and guys, everything I say has been thought of because of experience. I have either felt some way towards it or I have seen people do it. Now, mind you, as I said at the beginning, some of these behaviors you have to pick up on your own because they're internal, but some could be outwardly observed. So if I'm working next to you, I'll be able to see it and maybe I can regulate some of that behavior. Here's the first one. You share your personal information with them. Guys, this happens. I don't care what the information is, whether it's about sports or your car or, telling them where you shop. I mean, every bit of information that you provide, they're able to figure out something more about you that could relate to a routine or a habit. And it's just leverage. It's just leverage. So guys, my thing, number one, do not share your personal information with them. Do not give them any leverage that they need to pull you out of your prescribed role. Joe, what's your thoughts on this first?
Absolutely. It's human nature that you want to speak and talk with people, but you got to understand you're dealing with convicted felons. And the best way to keep yourself out of trouble is never divulge any personal information and always treat the situation like a Miranda warning. Anything you say can and will be used against you at some point. It may not be today, but it's going to be at some point. It doesn't matter how small of a detail it is. Football, car, your favorite color, anything that you say can give an inmate a way in.
Yeah, guys. And again, this is just, good knowledge. It's as little, even if it's a small, little, tiny bit of information, you have to realize where they could possibly go with that. So just be very careful. Do not share your personal information, and do not talk about your personal information with others in and around the inmate population. Okay, number 2, and yes, sad this happens, you trust them more than you trust your coworkers. And not only do you feel that, but sometimes you let the inmates know that. So having said that, guys, 100% not doing that. You trust them more than you trust your coworkers. That is the ultimate divide, because when it comes to trust, it's like, where am I going to go when I need information, when I'm dealing with a concern that I don't know how to solve? Well, I should be able to go to my coworkers, my peers, because I trust them. They're in the position to best help me solve whatever concerns I have. But my biggest thing is when you start to push the trust away from your coworkers and start trusting the inmates more, you wind up going to them to help you solve problems, and that opens up a whole other can of worms. And yes, guys, I say this because I've seen it. I've even heard staff sometimes tell an inmate, yeah, I trust you more than my coworkers, because you could have a staff member that could be disgruntled, hates the job, winds up generalizing it out in regards to how he feels about everything. And next thing you know, when he's venting to the inmates or she's venting to the inmates, they wind up saying, yeah, sometimes I trust you more than my coworkers. And the inmate now has that ability now to divide and conquer. Joe, I'm sure you've heard this said before, correct?
Oh, time or two, definitely. When you got yourself in that position where you honestly and truly feel that you trust a convict more than you trust your coworkers, it is time to self-analyze yourself immediately and deeply, because at no time should you trust a convict more than you trust your coworkers, because of the fact, for 2 reasons. One, you're letting an offender causing the divide between yourself and your team, or the entire team, or that convict has already got his hooks into you and looking to down the duck. If you trust the convict that much, and you actually tell him that, he's already got his hooks into you, which means that it's soon that you're going to be doing other things for him.
Yeah, the game is already afoot. And remember, guys,
has begun.
And remember this. If you're in this profession, the only reason you do the right thing is because you don't want to go to jail or you don't want to get caught, and you think that's enough to hold you to the straight and narrow. If you start trusting the inmate more than you trust your coworkers, those external consequences don't matter to you, because you're going to think that they're not going to turn you in, or foolishly think that they're not going to turn you in. Next one, you find yourself defending their negative behavior. I've seen that time and time again. I've seen staff who have, I guess, I don't know if they're saying they're building a rapport, whatever it is. The inmate does something foolish, something they should obviously be written up for, and all of a sudden someone comes out of the woodwork and says, whoa, Joe, do me a favor. Don't write up inmate Gangi. You know what? He's doing the right thing. He didn't mean what he did. Can you give him a second chance? And it's just this Pandora's box. Now, mind you, granted, sometimes we will work with individuals, but how come it's so weird that you're only defending this one? You don't speak up for anybody else in the population, but you speak up for this one. So when you start defending their negative behavior in an effort to either help them avoid getting charged, or even worse, hide what they've done. Well, Joe, are you sure you saw that, Joe? Are you sure? Because I've even seen supervisors where an officer went to write up an inmate, and the officer's 100% correct, and the supervisor went to the officer and said, yeah, but how do you know it was him? Like, pretty much right in front of the inmate. Come on, guys. Be very careful. When you start defending that negative behavior, your justification may not be what you may think it may be. It may be that you're overly involved with that inmate. Joe, what's your thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. If you find yourself defending an inmate, then you're definitely overly involved. The only time that, you should truly and honestly have to defend somebody's behavior is, to me, is during an assault. If you have a true assailant and a true victim, and that's something that, you should have to testify to, that kind of thing is understandable. But if you find yourself defending an inmate's behavior over little small things, Messy cell, not keeping his bed, made, sexual misconducts. You find yourself defending inmates behind that. We definitely have an issue.
Yep. And guys, as I said, you know that they've done something wrong, and you're now making the effort to either justify what they've done, negate or minimize what they've done, or actually question the person who saw it happen. Because again, that to me is you're overly involved. Let the chips fall where they may sometimes, because in the end, that's the best way for these matters to settle themselves. Let them go through the process and let the inmate learn to change and do the right things through accountability. It's called accountability. All right. This is a good one too. You feel responsible for their negative behavior. I've seen that happen where even with a program provider, let's say they're working with an inmate, the inmate winds up doing something foolish, and the program provider winds up feeling levels of guilt because they felt they could have done more to prevent that inmate from being foolish. Sad to say, it happens a lot. Again, guys, remember, they are in control of their own actions. You make the effort to create change, but ultimately you can't see them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're responsible for their own choices. The last thing you want is to minimize their accountability by saying, well, this inmate acted out, but you know what? I could have provided him more the last time we did our program. I didn't catch on that he was getting angry, and I didn't know that when he went to the unit later, he would have wind up assaulting somebody. It's on him. It's his actions. Granted, we make our efforts as best we can, but when people want to change, they'll change. Trust me, and then we could work with them. But part of change is accountability, and nobody will feel accountability if you take up the guilt for what was done. Because at that point, if you're taking up the guilt, there's no room for accountability. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? Have you seen that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Every individual makes their own choices, regardless of others' actions. I don't take responsibility for actions that Gangi makes, and he doesn't take any kind of responsibility for negative actions or behavior that I make. So at no time should you have to feel responsible or should feel responsible for the bad choices of others.
Yeah, and this kind of runs in line with this one, but a little bit more of an individual thing. You feel guilty if you have to write them a charge. So again, if you got an inmate that does something foolish, and now I'm the one that catches it, and I'm the one that's got to hold them accountable, and the person goes, well, if you write me up, I won't be able to have visits, or I won't be able to have A, B, C, D, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, yeah, that's right. I don't really want to do that because God forbid you can't get visits. And now again, you're taking on the responsibility of their negative behavior. So having said that, you did something foolish, and then you're putting it on me now because I have to write you up and hold you responsible. And now it comes with these levels of consequences. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm going to give you back the accountability. Remember, I didn't want to come to work today writing you up, but you put me in a situation where I had to. And now you're saying that, let's say you can't have a visit because of me. No, that's because of you. That guilt is not going to work on me. My effort is still to hold you accountable. But maybe next time when you do the right thing and you're able to have a visit, you can tell your family the truth, that the reason why you didn't have the visit was because you did something you shouldn't have done, as opposed to saying, yeah, well, Gangi wrote me up, and because of Gangi, I couldn't have a visit. Oh, Gangi's going to be right behind you and telling your family, hey, that's not true. I wrote him up because he did what he wasn't supposed to do, and I got to hold him accountable because that's my job. Joe, what's your thoughts on people that feel guilty when they write up an inmate a charge?
Yeah, I mean, you're there to do a job. You have policies and rules to enforce amongst the population. I don't know a parent that doesn't feel some kind of way when they have to discipline their child, but in the greater good, you still have to discipline the child. Offenders are the same way, regardless if he's a good worker, regardless, whatever the case may be. If he does something that warrants a charge and you have to write the disciplinary, there's nothing to feel guilty about because you're not the one that did that to him. He did it to himself.
Yep. And that moves us to the next one. This one does happen. You accept their offer of protection. Guys, there's so many things said when this happens. Sometimes you'll have inmates that may be shot callers in the unit, and they may come up and offer the officer who may be a little vulnerable or may not come off as assertive as they should, and they'll come up to the officer and say, hey, listen, if you have any concerns, I can go ahead and I'll protect you. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. So, I mean, look what they're saying here. Just even if you accept it, think about what you're saying, because I know there's people that will say, well, that's a good thing. They're protecting you. Whoa, hold on. First off, everything comes with a cost. Let's just get that out there. Second thing is he's saying that, one, you're weak. That's another thing. Second thing, if that person's protecting you, the inmate, who's running the unit, that's another thing. And then the other thing is, I got my people. If I have a concern, I don't need your protection. Hey, I got a code. And all of a sudden, my people come. So the moment you say, hey, I'm okay with taking that protection, you're also saying that you don't trust your own people to have your back. Joe, what's your thoughts on that? Because this does happen, Joe. I hear it a lot, and I hear a lot of people accepting it.
Yeah. It happens more often than you know. Accepting an offer of protection from an inmate, all that is major leverage for them to use against you later on. You have plenty of coworkers, you have plenty of supervisors, there's plenty of other staff from other departments that are willing to respond to an emergency, and I've seen it happen. I've had people respond to emergencies from medical. I've seen them respond from classification. I've seen them respond from risk management. If you were short, you have plenty of people there to extend protection to you when the shit hits the fan. And no time should you offer any kind or accept any kind of offer of protection from an inmate. Again, if you are, just like Angie said, who the hell's running the unit?
I agree, man. And I've seen people like literally say, oh, my day was good. Such and such helps me run the unit, protects me. It's like, whoa. And I make sure I correct them and let them know. And it's funny because their mindset isn't there because they just see the gesture. There's always something. There's always a motive behind that gesture. And there's, again, what's being implied. This kind of leans towards protection, but just to kind of add it, you feel obligated to them. That's why we have no favors in prison, because favors come with a feeling of obligation. If an inmate needs something, I'm not providing the inmate with a favor. I'm going to do what they need. Hey, thanks, Gange. I appreciate the favor. There was no favor. You needed it. I gave it to you, or there was a concern. I had it addressed, but there's no favor, and vice versa. Vice versa is, hey, Gange, I'll clean for you, but I'm not going to clean for everyone else. Okay, what are you telling me? That you're going to clean just for me? No. You're cleaning because I told you to clean, and whoever else tells you to clean, that's an officer, you're going to clean. I mean, there's no specialized treatment here, so you got to make sure you nip those specific words that fall into obligation, like I'll do it for you and only you, or hey, I'll do you a favor. You got to correct them. Hey, I'll do you a favor, Gange. What favor? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. I may have said please. I get it because I want to be courteous. But that really didn't give you the reason to say no to it. And the moment you make my order look like you're doing me a favor, you're being removed. 100%. Because I'm not even tolerating that game, even at the smallest of level. And I've told a lot of people I worked around, if you give an inmate assignment, and the moment they say only for you, or I'm going to do you that favor, or whatever it is, remove them. I'm very zero tolerance with that one word, because I've seen individuals, especially when I was an officer, come back and want to be paid, pretty much. Hey, remember I did that favor for you last time, so what are you going to do for me now? Not happen, because that definitely falls into that area of obligation, which also could fall into levels of guilt. See how they all connect? Because all these connect. We can go all day and connect them all, but it's true. Well, that's right. He did me a favor last time when I gave him that order, and he cleaned up the area for me, and he made it look really good. And now Joe's got to write him up. And, well, maybe I should defend him because, man, he really did go out of his way for me last time. No, none of that. Sorry, man, you fucked up. It is what it is. There's no favors here. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? You feel obligated to them.
Yeah, no time should you feel obligated. To me, every sentence that comes out of an inmate's mouth is a motive to me. Whether it's a request, a sentence, everything's a motive. Obligation leads to favors lead to leverage leads to corruption, and so on and so forth. It's just, at no time should you ever have to feel or should feel obligated to an offender.
Yeah, and guys, I want to make sure people know we're not being cold here. It's just that this is the universal precaution. You do have to interact with them. So these are things that you have to weigh on during each interaction, because now you even have this. Remember we said kind of things kind of bleed into each other? Feelings of obligation, right? Let's say, whatever it is. That could also lead to you not being able to say no to them. Because again, the moment you think you and this inmate are buddy, it gets tested the moment you say no to them. I mean, that's what my supervisor once told me. And when you feel hesitant in saying no to a specific inmate, but you have no problem saying no to everyone else, yeah, you're too close to the one. You're 100% too close to the one, because even if that inmate is a better inmate, you still can't treat them different. Technically, they'll never know to some extent that they're better in your eyes, because you're still going to treat them the same to keep things consistent. Because, guys, it's the universal precaution, but you can have nicety, people just being nice, as an effort to manipulate. So you always got to keep things consistent. And I think one of the true tests of consistency that could easily be seen and felt internally, but also seen by others, is your ability to say no. Your ability to say no is definitely something that can easily be seen. And if you can't do it at a consistent level, Joe mentioned self-analyze. You need to analyze yourself, whether it's, I can't say no to this inmate, I want to know why I can't do that, or I can't say no at all to any inmate. That's even a bigger problem. Joe, I'm sure you've seen this, right?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite terms is it's easier to turn a no into a yes than it is to say to turn a yes into a no. We tell our kids no every day. No, you can't do this. No, you can't have that. Offenders should be no different. If you can tell your child, or you can tell the neighbor's child, no, you can't do that, then you shouldn't have any issues telling an offender no. If you do, then you need to ask yourself why.
I agree, Joe. Let me see. So I got the next one here. This actually came from my lieutenant a long time ago when I took a class for him. He said, you think about them when you're at home. Now think about this, guys, because this does happen. You're at home, you're with your family. Again, the boundaries, or I'll go. No, I'll say barriers. Work is work, home is home, and you try not to let them bleed in. I know there are some emotions that can carry over, which your family can help you work through, but the thinking of an inmate, to me, is a very big concern. So even if I'm watching a football game, we're watching the Super Bowl, and I'm with my family, we're having a blast, and all of a sudden, whatever team wins, and I'm like, hey, Joe, wait till I go back to the facility and tell inmate Jim that the Giants just won. It's going to flip them out. It's like, what the hell are you doing? You're at home. Who cares what Jim thinks about the Giants or whatever the team is? It really doesn't matter. So my lieutenant kind of had the caveat with this. He goes, it's not so much even an emotional thing. You think about them when you're at home in any capacity. So it doesn't always have to be some feeling of love or some emotional connection. It could be just something as simple. I'm hanging out with my people, and I can't wait to talk about sports the next day to Jim, because they're in your head. However it may be, they're in your head. And now when you go back to work, you're not Officer Joe. You're an avid fan of sports, an avid fan of football. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, do your 8 and leave them all at the gate. I've seen officers on both ends of the spectrum on this. Ones that were overly familiar, couldn't wait to go back and rub in their faces about, their favorite sports team winning, and I've had the opposite polar end of that, where I've had officers so obsessive with hatred towards offenders that, I would literally be in Walmart and see one of my officers 2 or 3 days later, and they track me down from across the store to ask me about a disciplinary that's written on them. You should not be thinking about an offender once you leave that gate, let alone at home with your family, with your kids. Definitely a big warning flag.
Yeah, I think one day when we take these 20 tips, we'll connect them all. I think it'll be fun, a little fun game. But again, because this could also connect, you believe that this inmate is different. That to me is definitely something that happens a lot, because Once you start believing the inmate is different, your interactions, and when I mean different in a favorable way, your actions towards them tend to be different. You don't write them like you would write somebody else. You give them, well, it'll be another tip later on, but we'll discuss it later. But you give them more freedoms ultimately. So again, the moment you believe that this inmate's different, what I mean different in a favorable way, your treatment to them will automatically be different. And it will be easily seen because it breaks away from the consistency in comparison to others. And again, I have seen people justify their actions by saying this inmate's different or not this one. And that's when they've given that inmate this ultimate level of trust. And then it's like, you know, okay, yeah, but this inmate's okay. This inmate is not going to go through the gate when I accidentally leave it open. Or this inmate is not going to pick up the keys that I accidentally left on my desk. Why? Because they're different. No, because they're not like every other inmate. Wow, that means you must be able to have a lot of dialogue with that inmate to automatically think that. Like there must be a lot of interaction you're having with that inmate that now separates that inmate from everybody else. And the funny thing about that, and I want people to realize something on that, when someone thinks that way, that's the inmate that's in their head that made them think that way. That's not you coming to work one day saying, yeah, that inmate's different than everyone else. That's the inmate either doing behaviors and then talking and just kind of, you know, playing the little game that you're playing in your head all the time that he is different or she is different than everyone else. And Joe, in your years, I am positive you heard that before. You're muted, Joe.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, you know, this one here is probably the number one reason why we start staff investigations, because you can physically see with your own eyes that somebody is treating an offender different from the rest of the population. And, you know, it's one of the things that we start to watch, and we, you know, because we ask ourselves as, you know, as lieutenants or captains, sergeants, whatever, we're asking ourselves why. Is there a relationship here? They just overly familiar? Are they related? Do they go to school together? You know, seeing somebody treat an offender different from the rest of the population is probably the number one indicator to us, is, you know, why we start investigations and we start looking a little deeper into their actions or their interactions with each other. You know, you should never, you know, to me, a crook is a crook is a crook. You know, was what I was taught a long time ago. You treat them all the same. And you don't treat any indifferently, because you know, once you start treating one different, not only does that offender see it, but the rest of the population sees it.
Yeah.
And you know, that could cause issues later on down the line. And you may not necessarily intended to treat that inmate different, but it doesn't mean he won't get assaulted for it by his own population later. So you know, those are things that you got to keep in your mind.
Safety concern, and trust me, the staff also see it too. And it's weird because I think that the inmates see it, but your peers feel it. If that makes any sense. The inmates see it, and your peers just feel it. They know because they're going with their experience. So they feel it. Hopefully they're motivated by those feelings to do the right thing. You go out of your way to see the inmate at work. I've definitely seen that happen, guys. When there's an investigation between over an undue relationship between an officer and inmate, and let's say, you know, there's a reason for the investigative division to say, you know what, let's separate these two, and let's go ahead and see what happens. 9 times out of 10, if let's say, you know, I'm an inmate, or let's say Joe's an inmate and I'm the officer, and you know, we got this undue relationship going on. The moment they separate us is the moment that me as an officer, I start to lose a little power or a little control, whatever that is, the comfortability of what I once had, where I'm able to see that inmate every day. So now I can't see them. I lose that level of control. And the moment you separate us, I'm going to try to find a way to reconnect, whether it's talking to another inmate to pass a message, or even stupid enough, talk to another officer to pass a message, or find myself out of bounds to pass a message, go into a unit that I don't work. So I truly believe that you definitely know you are overly involved when you are trying to see that inmate when you're at work. But I will tell you one thing, that at that point, the game is deep. I mean, the game is deep because that person now is controlling where you want to be. And you're not even though you may be at work on your post, you're not on your post. You're thinking of where that inmate is. And again, I've seen this a lot when it comes to even relationships, sadly, between an officer and an inmate. And you kind of catch it. And the officer may think they're in control, whatever. Well, maybe the male officer may think they're in the control. Sometimes, and nothing's 100%, the female may be a little bit more submissive in that level of control and kind of accept the levels of protection. Nothing's 100%. Nothing's 100%. But there are cases where that could happen. But with that said, all of a sudden you have this level of control. And then what happens is they separate. And then you realize that you never had control. So now you're trying to fight to gain something because now the inmate is not under your direct influence. But again, Joe, I am sure you saw this as well.
Yeah. To me, if you're at this stage of the game, you're past the point of no return. You find yourself falling out of place, off your duty post to somebody else's duty post to go see an offender, whether it be ad seg, the ODR, regardless. If you're leaving your duty post to go see an offender who's located somewhere else in the facility, you're done. You're pretty much over. I've seen them, walk by an offender's housing area, wave at them, go out to the parking lot and get on their phone, and they wait for a call from the offender they just waved at, and 20 minutes later they're back in from their break. If you're at this stage of the game, you're pretty much over.
Yeah, and guys, I also want to mention something else. This type of bullshit could also bring third parties involved, because sometimes in some facilities you can't go to another area unless you have the permission of your supervisor. And then now your supervisor is letting you go there blindly thinking, yeah, Joe's not going to be a fool. And then all of a sudden Joe was a fool. And now you get questioned. Hey, Supervisor Gangi, come here. Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you know that Joe is being accused for raping inmate Smith? I just want to ask, it says here that you approved Joe to go in that unit 20 times. What was he doing in that unit that required that required him to be there? Because remember, as a supervisor, you should know, because you don't blindly give out approvals. You're supposed to do your due diligence and ask, why do you want to go there? Maybe even do a follow-up. But having said that, that's how other people get involved, because that person may need your approval, and here they are doing something foolish. And even if I can't get the person that was doing something foolish because Joe was that good, guess what I could get? The fact that you as a supervisor let that person get there, because that's in the logbook or that's on camera. So again, guys, this is a harsh video, but it's to keep you open, man. I mean, think about it. I'm not being an asshole, and neither is Joe, but this is serious here, and I don't think it's a dialogue that you're meant to have lightly. This is more with complacent body language, but you have your hands in your pocket when interacting with the inmate, more about complacent body language. Guys, I mean, let me tell you something right now, and I'll keep this one quick too, but if I have an inmate that's talking to me and I'm kind of just relaxed, maybe my feet on the desk, my hand in my pocket, whatever it is, my body language shows a comfortability that starts first in my head, starts first here. That means somewhere along the line, I don't think that this person's a threat. I've welcomed them into this my space. And not only are they in my space, but I'm totally relaxed. So having said that, for me, that's observable. And that's something I can observe as your peer, because your body language shows me what's going on in your head. So if I see you sitting there relaxed, my first thing as your partner, let's say, dude, what's going on in your head right now that you would have an inmate like that up close to you in your space, and you just sit on your desk with your feet up and your hands in your pocket, chatting and laughing. That body language is a sign of the complacency that's going on in your head. Joe, I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Oh yeah, multiple times. You should never have your hands bound by any pockets. You treat them all like they're a threat. If you want to stand there at the interview stance, that's one thing. but you should never have your hands somewhere where you can't get them out quickly to defend yourself. It's human nature. You're standing around with the guys, and you're doing this number, or you're doing this number, or you never find yourself with your hands in your pockets totally. So being around an offender shouldn't be any different. You should always keep your hands out in front of you, and treat them all like they're a threat, because it's even the ones that you don't think are the threats are the ones that wind up being the threat, because you have allowed yourself to be overly complacent with your own safety, and that's what it boils down to, is your own safety.
Yeah, and obviously, if you don't take into account your own safety, you're also not taking into account the safety of the people that work around you, the people that trust you. I mean, remember that they trust you. This is unique. You allow the inmate to call you by your first name. Guys, in my career, I have maybe called an inmate by their first name a few times. And the reason why is because it's strategic for me. They're having some breakdown. I'm trying to get through whatever that initial barrier is. And in an effort to de-escalate, I may try to remove, some level of formality very strategically, and say, instead of like, hey, Mr. Pomponio, hey, Joe, talk to me. What's going on? You're not yourself today. But that has never been utilized on me. Like, I've never had an inmate come up to me and I'm having a bad day, and the inmate comes say, hey, Tony, you good? You good? I've walked into units, especially the units that have more senior staff. So maybe the earlier shifts, and you walk into a unit and first names are being thrown around like you wouldn't believe. There's no professional role in any of those titles. It's just, hey, Joe, hey, Jim, hey, Bob, hey, Bill. And it's like, who are we talking to here? Is it something that is serious? I mean, it could be, because it removes the label of professionalism that connects you to your role and reminds you of who they are. I'm very big on labels. And again, not to condescend, but as a tool to remind you of your place. So when you start dropping those first names, I mean, maybe there's a level of familiarity, but be strategic with it, because again, if something happens, it doesn't have the impact. So again, I utilize first names, but rarely, because once the incident's done, I go right back to Mr. Pomponio. You know what I mean? But maybe but never am I, in a unit just saying, hey, Joe, hey, call me Tim, hey, call me. No, I think that's a very big concern, and I do know it happens. Keep the title in your name, because at no end should an inmate ever be calling you by your first name. It is strategic in nature, your first name. Take a look at when you got in trouble and your parents, it went from like Tony to me, Anthony. Oh, shit. And you turn around. So the use of the first name is very strategic and eliminates barriers. And Joe, I'm sure you would agree with that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, never let them use your first name, because you lose all professionalism. You lose your title and integrity that goes with that title. You don't become, you're no longer Officer Pomponio. You're just Joe. Mm-hmm. And it takes away the professionalism in your title, takes away the integrity and the professionalism of the job that you're there to do. And like Anthony said, I've used the first name of inmates before during crisis management issues, high tense issues where inmates going off in his cell, or he's trying to commit suicide or whatever, and you're trying to, like he said, trying to break that barrier and kind of get their attention real quick, to kind of reshift their focus somewhere else. But in no time should you let an inmate just casually come up and call you by your first name. Huge no.
Yeah, again, it's strategic in nature. So got to be wary of that and nip it. Now, I'm not saying they can't discover your first name. Unfortunately, they can. It's easy, but don't let them use it. Because I know people are like, oh, well, they'll never know my first. Well, they can. You write them a charge. They can easily find out your first name. But the moment they do, you nip them. Hey, don't ever say that again. You do that again, I'm going to write you. Because you can write them for that. There's no need for you to be yelling out my first name. Because sometimes an inmate will purposely get charged in the hopes that their first name or your first name is provided when they read the charge. Again, remember I said again, sometimes these tips bleed into each other. This could bleed in this next one when you feel obligated to the inmate or you build a trust. I mean, so many different avenues that could take you this way when you give the inmate information they should not have. So I'll give you one. So, Joe did me a favor last week. He made my area nice and clean, right? supervisor came in. It made me look good. I go back, and not only did I let the inmate do me a favor, but then I actually thanked the inmate. Hey, Joe, thank you so much for what you did, because the supervisor came in and he noticed, that I had a clean unit, and he really made me look good. Oh, not a problem. And then a couple of days later, Joe comes up and says, hey, remember I made you look good in front of your supervisor because you told me I made you look good in front of your supervisor. Hey, when's the next time they're searching this area? Just curious, because not that I'm hiding anything, but hey, come on, man, I made you look good in front of your supervisors, so you think you can give me a heads up when they're searching some areas? And I mean, am I right, Joe?
Oh yeah, shakedown is probably the number one culprit of information that gets shared when it shouldn't have. Administration will have a staff meeting, or they'll call it spur of the moment, or they get some sort of investigation where okay, we're fixing to go shake this area down, and yeah, that's probably the number one culprit of the information that gets shared by staff that shouldn't be. If you find yourself giving an inmate a heads up, you're done.
and by the way, that's one of many things they can give, because they could, what? Here's another thing, guys. One thing that we can't check at that metal detector is personal information that we have on each other. So think about how dangerous that could be, where, I'm not asking about a shakedown. I'm saying, hey, Joe, remember that time I helped you out? Hey, listen, what's up with Officer Hamilton? What's going on with him? Where's he from? And then you get people that are dumb enough to share personal information of other officers or other staff to that inmate. Again, the trust that's there. Now imagine, guys, again, it kind of relates, but if I trust my coworkers less than I trust the inmates, so that means I trust the inmates more, you don't think I'm going to share some information about my coworkers to them? Why not? I trust them. I trust the inmates. Why wouldn't I do that? And again, I trust the inmates because I trust my peers less. Comparison. This is good. I've kind of touched into this before, but you talk negatively about your coworkers to them. That kind of aids that divide and conquer. So like, you have a bad day, the inmates witness it, and then the moment, let's say me and Joe have a bad day. They see me and Joe having an argument, or Joe's my supervisor, and he yells at me foolishly in front of all the other inmates. Joe leaves. Those inmates are going to come right to me and tell me how wrong Joe was. And my dumbass, in order to redeem myself, I'm going to say, yeah, Joe was wrong, and he shouldn't talk to me like that way. That's why a lot of people think he's an asshole around here, blah, blah, blah. And they're loving it because they're just going to keep fueling the divide. And next thing you know, you and Joe, you guys stop talking to each other because you had one bad day. Joe should have been a little more professional, but we all have bad days. But we don't talk to each other, and the inmates love it. Because now, here's what happens. I'm being isolated. I'm being played. Now I have a problem, and they know I'm not going to go to Joe. I don't know how to solve this issue, but I'm not going to go to Joe. So out of desperation, let me go talk to the inmates that talked to me yesterday. Maybe they'll help me. Why? Well, because I don't talk to Joe anymore. You think that's a good enough excuse? Yeah, you don't talk to your sergeant because you guys have a concern with each other, but now you're going to the inmates for information. Remember that, guys. It's all personal. If you and Joe don't communicate, and the inmates love that, when you have a concern, you're not going to go to Joe because you're going to be uncomfortable going to Joe. You're not going to want to admit to Joe that you need help. So your own pride is now going to get in the way of you doing the right thing and talking to Joe as opposed to the inmates. Guys, if you have a concern, deal with it. Talk to Joe on the side. Do whatever you got to do, but do not let your pride get in the way of you needing that person again, because there's going to be times when we do need each other. And if we decide not to talk to each other and I have a concern, there's only one avenue that's left when staff don't talk to each other. Whether even if you want to go department-wise, civilian to custody, whatever it is. If we can't work together and communicate, guess who picks up that gap? That's all I'm saying. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you should always be working out your differences privately with that person that you have the problem with. Inmates are ear hustling 24/7, regardless of whether you intended for them to hear it or you said it to another coworker and they accidentally heard it. Well, number one, you shouldn't be talking to another coworker about another coworker. You should be solving your issue with that coworker. Inmates use everything you say as a motive. Everything that you say and do is a manipulation or a motive tactic for them. So, they're ear hustling, they're listening, I hate when Gangi comes to work, he makes the place seem so damn tense. He's always, He's always doing this. He's always doing that. And, here I'm talking to somebody else about Gangi instead of me just going to Gangi, So now the inmate has an in. Not only is he taking what you say back to the offender population and sharing it with them, so now the whole unit knows, you shouldn't be, number one, you shouldn't be discussing a coworker with another coworker to begin with. You should be solving that issue with them.
Yep. I mean, that's the key, right? The moment they say, sounds like, you know what? I'll just go ahead and talk to Joe. I don't need you to be in the middle of this. This is unique. You look for their approval to be liked or popular to do your job. So you look for their approval to do your job. This happens when you're more concerned about being liked and popular than you are about being respected. You are going to do a lot of things in corrections that are not going to be seen as favorable to the inmate because, again, they may want things to manipulate some level of control. Not all. Let's just, put the caveat in there. Not all, but there will be some. And the universal precaution of it all is because you don't know where the wolf is. You keep that consistency. So again, you look for their approval. It's like, okay, well, it's not about respect. I just want to be popular. And this also bleeds into you not being able to say no. Why not? Because, well, if I say no, the inmates are not going to like me. And inmates will play that. Inmates will also come to you and tell you, well, I thought you were different. I didn't think you were like Joe, Gangi. Officer Joe, he sweats this all the time, but we thought you were different. We thought you were nice. And now all of a sudden, that's replaying in your head that the moment you do your job, you're no longer nice. Well, I'm not here to be nice. I'm here to be respectful, be professional. And at the end of the day, it's a job. It's literally just a job. So when you're looking to be popular and to do whatever favorable in the inmate's eyes, you're basically saying, hey, can you give me permission to do my job? Because that's what it is, guys. You're more concerned about their approval to be popular than it is for you to do your job. So you might as well just walk around all day and instead of giving it orders, ask them. Just ask them. Say, hey, is it okay if I do this? Or if it's okay, I do that because I don't want to get anybody angry because I just want to be everyone's friend. And Joe, I'm sure you saw that as well, Joe.
Yeah, the penitentiary is definitely not high school. You're not there to win a popularity contest. Popularity in the penitentiary leads to compromise. And once you allow yourself to be compromised because you're more worried about your popularity than you are to, actually do your job and the safety of yourself and your coworkers, big problem. Never, ever, ever, ever go to an offender for a popularity contest. If you're that concerned about it, if you're that concerned about your popularity, you need to take a look at your need to reevaluate your self-esteem and your self-integrity.
I love that. And guys, listen, I mean, I'm very passionate about this topic. I don't think at one point it was something that we taught on. It's a process, not just an outcome. So as you can see, I may have a little bit more emotion on this show than I do for most, but this was the first book I ever wrote. This was the first series of classes I've ever taught. This was the first I ever went on national TV for. It's a topic that I know exists. It's a topic that I feel we don't take serious. And it's a topic that leads to so much, in regards to consequences and just safety and just foolish shit that you got to have some passion when talking about it. Because if you don't have passion, people don't believe it's that serious. And again, I'm not trying to condescend anybody in having this dialogue, but at the end of the day, guys, you got to realize that this literally is manipulation happens because you allow it. Even if you think you're untouchable, you still allow it. Because again, there's a game crafted for everyone. So learn the game. Know that you could be vulnerable. So having said that, even people that always follow the rules. And what I mean by that is that becomes their backbone for every decision that they make. Be wary of that because that could be used against you because that leads into some level of expectation. So there's always that balance in corrections because I've seen people that have seen staff as weak that constantly go to policy and procedure. It's like, make the fucking decision. Because sometimes policy and procedure doesn't have what you need. I hired you to make a damn decision. Policy and procedure structures the decision. Don't get me wrong. But, sometimes you got to kind of make moves within that procedure to meet the needs you want. And then this is a good one. We're coming down to the last four. You rationalize your connection with the inmate by just saying you're just building a rapport. This is something Russ Hamilton also hates as well because rapport – I mean, okay, so at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of officers that have been caught up, have been handcuffed, have been brought out. They have no idea really what the hell just happened. And then when they go to justify, they're like, man, I was just building a rapport. Yeah, but the rapport, whatever that means, didn't produce anything. You know, a lot of officers or a lot of staff that get caught up wind up, you know, in the process of the game, constantly have in their mind that they're building a rapport, they're building a rapport, they're building a rapport, and then their supervisors and their peers are like, what is this person doing? And they go to confront them, and instead of the person kind of stepping back, you know, outside of themselves and seeing, yeah, maybe let me look at myself and see how others would see me, they don't see that. What they do is they go quick into justification mode, and they say, wait, guys, you're saying I'm doing what? That I'm too close? Guys, I'm only building a rapport. You know, because remember, they've been doing this for a while now, so they have to justify that. So they, instead of them admitting fault, they justify by saying, I'm building a rapport. And then someone else will go back, and this is what should always be done, whether it's a supervisor or their peers, saying, well, if you're building a rapport, what information have you ever passed off? Because this relationship's been going on for quite some time. Have you been able to pass off anything actionable? Well, what rapport are you building? I'm not understanding it. Because right now, if you're not producing anything actionable, I don't know, you know, how this rapport is benefiting the facility, you know, and I'm not being cold, but guys, a lot of people get caught up because in their head, they've justified whatever actions they've done before they got caught up. Say, I was just building a rapport. I mean, Joe, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the only people you should be building a rapport with is with your staff members. You know, when it comes to the offender population, you need to be presenting an appearance, not building a rapport. You're not there to build a rapport. You're there to keep them structured. You're there to keep them in line. You're there to keep them in the fence. You know, there's no rapport to build with an offender. You know, the not so much the trust factor, but the consistency, the firmness, the fairness that you present in your appearance with the offender population will give them all the rapport that they need to know that you're not the one to be screwed with.
Yep. I like that, Joe. I like that. All right, down to three more. We can go. This one's a quick one. Obviously, we know not to do this, but you accept personal compliments from them. What I mean by accept, you don't tell them no. So even you not saying nothing is still acknowledging the fact that it's okay. Compliments have to be addressed. Once they compliment you, you got to tell them how inappropriate it is. It's not within this professional relationship. So again, when it comes to compliments, when I say that you accept, that means that you haven't done anything to let the inmate know that what they've said is inappropriate. Because once you open that door, it's a Pandora's box, not only for that inmate, but for everyone else that thinks it's okay to compliment you. And next thing you know, you're walking in a unit and whistles and everything else is going off because you never nipped it the first time. Let me tell you something. The Pandora's box can go both ways. You can nip it once and it barely ever happens again, or you can allow it to happen and then it opens up a whole whirlwind of shit. So you got to choose, what an open door, closed door really doesn't matter, but you got to choose which direction you want to go with your career. You want to say no and set it right the first time, or do you want to just kind of say yes and see where it goes? Because at one point you're not going to have control. And that's something that we could see by the way. That's something that your peers will definitely be able to see and recognize, not just the inmates, but us too. Joe, what's your thoughts on personal compliments?
Yeah, personal compliments are you know, it is a Pandora's box because I've seen it, you know, where, you know, especially towards the females in a male facility, I've seen it go quite bad. You know, all it takes is one compliment from an offender, and you know that officer may not have the best home life, and you know the head starts getting blown up with compliments, and she starts changing her appearance. You know, it once Pandora's out of that box, it's hard to get it back in that box. You know, you should never accept a compliment from an offender, you know, unless you know, by some stroke of a miracle or you know, you medically saved their life and they say thank you. You know, that should be the only time that you should accept a compliment.
Yeah, and I like that. It's related to your professional duties, you know, but again, just be wary because anytime you open up that thing, you got to ask yourself, what's the motive behind the gesture? Like Joe said earlier today, every word that comes out of your mouth, I want to know the motive behind it. This one's quick because we kind of touched on this before, but you allow the inmate more freedoms than the other inmates. That's kind of just what we said before, the inconsistency in treating this one inmate as opposed to the other inmates. And again, that's something that could be very easily seen and again, felt by your staff that you need to correct, because that's definitely something that if I'm working with you, I can clearly see that. So this is the last one, Joe. Let me just get to the last one. This one's more of a tactical one. It may come off superficial, but bear with me. I just wanted to add one to make a number 20, but I do think it matters. I've done searches when I was an officer, even as a sergeant, oversaw a couple of searches. And there were many times where I found pens that were personalized, because sometimes we may give somebody a pen and literally forget we gave it to them. Now, granted, yes, we could be walking around with, pens that are found in the prison or jail, and I get it. Sometimes you may hand those out. I get it. I mean, that's not your pen. That's not your personal pen. Your personal pen maybe is somewhere else. I don't know, but it's definitely not, where you have easy access, because again, you don't want, to be giving out your personal pen and then forgetting. And then one day someone's doing a search and finds, your personal pen or your union pen, the pen that your union gave you. So again, be wary when you give out your personal pen. So again, I don't mean, some bullshit pen that you may carry around at the job that's from the job. I mean literally a personal pen that's either was given to you from the union or looks really nice, that goes pretty good with your uniform, has your name up on it, because I have done searches and I have found those pens. And is it superficial tip? I don't think so. I thought it was worth adding. And I remember a video back when where Gary Yorkhead did it, where for the officers that put the pens in their pocket, be very wary, because the inmate can get close, take that pen out of your pocket, put it right in your neck. But Joe, what's your thought on that last tip? You give the inmate your personal pen.
Yeah, in my career, I've always carried indigent pens from the penitentiary. The kinds that are rubbery, they're short, just for that reason. Because you got to think the pen that you give an offender and forget about, may not have been intentional, but you forgot about it. Now he's got your pen. Now he can be hiding contraband drugs in that pen. He could be using it to smoke things with that pen. He could be melting it down, getting ready to use it for a weapon. The ink from that pen could, be a brand new tattoo gun. You just never know. So you always have to be wary about giving out your personal pen to anybody.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, this list is also in my book coming out for rookies. But I left it open. I'm not as detailed. So when you are a senior officer or a training officer, the book is meant for you to help translate to the rookies as well. So you could take these tips and then kind of invent your own stories that relate to the sign of being overly due or unduly familiar. That's what I meant. Unduly familiar. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Yeah, I mean, for all the rookies that watch this, the one analogy I can give you that kind of best summarizes everything that we've talked about is, you're in a store that has multiple surveillance cameras. Most penitentiaries have surveillance cameras. We don't do anything wrong intentionally because those cameras are there. Those cameras keep us in bounds. They keep us within our confines of the rules, policies, procedures. When you're working in a penitentiary, you also got to remember that, if you have 1,000 convicts on that farm, every set of those eyes is another set of cameras. However many staff you got that are on your shift, that's another set of cameras. So you got to portray yourself in everybody's camera with professionalism and integrity, and, keep yourself within your personal confines and within professional confines. Everything that comes out of an inmate's mouth to me, and, I've always taught this is suspect. Every time an inmate makes a statement, it's a motive. There's always an end for them somewhere. So just remember that. Never divulge your personal information to them, because anything that you say to them can, and at some point will be used against you for something later on down the line. So, when dealing with the offender population, just remember, it's not like they can't learn our first names. Any inmate can go to a law library. There's so much public record on each and every one of us out there and floating around in the world right now that, literally for $3, an inmate can go to the law library and know your name and address. Why? Because it's public record. Just like anybody else can find that information too. But you should never personally yourself divulge that kind of information to the offender, because that starts the overfamiliarity and the complacency and getting comfortable. So just remember, every set of eyes inside a penitentiary is a surveillance camera. And the best thing you can do is keep yourself professional with integrity. Never let yourself get distracted to the point where you're divulging your personal information or somebody else's information.
Yeah, and I like what you said, because sometimes you'll have people that will try to justify it by saying, well, it's not like they can't get it anywhere else. Yeah, but you want you to know something, whether they could or can't, you just justify doing it. That's the key.
Absolutely.
You just justified giving that person, that inmate, all that personal information, regardless they can get it somewhere else. You don't want to come from you. But again, the reason why we have this dialogue is kind of keep people on their toes. Universal precaution still means that you interact, still means you engage. But again, you got to be cautious. So everything we said, however it falls on whatever extreme, remember, you got to walk the middle. That's what makes corrections hard. So you have to evaluate both extremes and then have the comfortability somewhere in the middle of how you want to navigate your career. Again, but you have to hold these things in the back of your mind and let that be your filter as you interact. So again, we're not being cold, but we do mention the worst, so you have a good foundation to filter things from. And I think that's the key of this dialogue, guys. Just and remember, guys, if ever you feel that you're being pulled from your prescribed role, that you're being isolated from your peers, you got to do something about it. You cannot allow yourself to be pulled out of your prescribed role, and you can't allow yourself to be isolated. Even if you're disgruntled and angry, be careful, because you could be isolating yourself, because people don't want to be around negativity. But inmates, they'll take the gap, because they'll know that nobody wants to talk to you. So you got to make your effort to show that communication with your peers is a priority, that you're connected, because that's the biggest key to end manipulation. Is that when the inmates look and they know that you're connected to all your peers, that there's a bond there, they won't try to, it just becomes too much of an obstacle for them to try to break through that. Because the things that make inmates successful when it comes to manipulation is, yes, there's a vulnerability, of course, that they could try to exploit, but they always look at the environment. We all have vulnerabilities, guys. The question is, does the environment help the game, or does it create an obstacle? And we want to make sure that by us being together, even if, let's say, Joe's vulnerable, if I'm vulnerable, whoever's vulnerable, there's just so much of an obstacle between, us and our united front, that we complement each other's vulnerability, and an inmate will be a fool regardless if they made the attempt to try to play us. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.